Good evening and welcome to another edition of MSW Films. Tonight I'm going to go over my top 5 favorite vampire movies of all times. Now, just so you know, these are I like classic movies, the ones that started it all. So you're not going to get stuff like Twilight. It's not going to be in here. That was just not that Twilight wasn't a good movie. It was just it was more of a, I don't know. It wasn't a it was a teenager's movie. It was a spin-off of just the movies that I want to have in my list. So also, Van Helsing is also a great vampire movie. Definitely a very watchable movie. Awesome effects and stuff. I'm not big on CGI, but in movies like that, it works. So that was a great movie. Unfortunately, it's not on my list. So here is my top 5 favorite vampire movies of all times. Now, vampire movies have never scared me. I've never been scared or got scared watching a vampire movie except for when I was 8 years old. And the first vampire movie I ever saw was the 1979 Tobe Hooper's version of Salams Lot. Salams Lot was definitely a creepy movie, and mainly because I saw it when I was 8. But it's still, to today, is a cult classic vampire movie. It always will be, and any horror fan will tell you that. It's at the top of the list of all-time vampire movies. Now, this is about a novelist who realizes that a vampire had a very rich person had moved into his town and turned out to be a vampire and was turning all the kids in the town into vampires. And it has some pretty creepy scenes in it. As a boy, I always remember the window scene of the little kid coming up to the window. And I found that to be pretty creepy. Also had some, pop-up scares. And just creepy stuff. So that is definitely on my list. As number 5, Salem's Lot. Moving on at number 4 would have to be From Dusk Till Dawn, which was directed by Robert Rodriguez. Now, this movie is a great movie because, for many reasons to me. One is because Robert Kurtzman is the person who wrote this movie. And if you don't know who Robert Kurtzman is one of the members of K&B Effects Group. So that group was Greg Nicotero, Robert Kurtzman, and Howard Berger. And all three of them did the effects in From Dusk Till Dawn. And Tom Savini, who was the person who basically taught Greg Nicotero makeup, he's in it too. It does a cameo at the end. So what a crazy movie. And that's probably because Quentin Tarantino wrote the screenplay. So it's like 2 movies in one. So it starts off with 2 brothers, George Clooney and Quentin Tarantino, who are bank robbers, and it just starts off action packed.
You bucking for early retirement? Shit.
What the fuck is that about?
You signaled the ranger.
I did it! You gotta believe me, I did it!
When they were talking, he mouthed the words, "Help us."
You fucking liar! I didn't say
Would you
shit!
shut the hell up?
Hey! You stop it! What the fuck is your problem? God damn it!
And it stays pretty suspenseful and thrilling, action-wise, and just like they took a family hostage and they're trying to get over the border to get away from the cops from stealing the money. And then once they cross into Mexico and get to this bar, the Titty Twister, this movie just changes into something else, and it becomes this just crazy, violent vampire movie with really cool effects. And again, directed by Robert Rodriguez, who I always like him as a director just because he's such a creative movie maker. If you don't know much about him, he for most of his movies, he writes the music. So he does the music scores. He edits most of his movies. He directs them. He writes a lot of his own movies. And in movies like Spy Kids and things like that, he does the CGI effects. So they're a very talented individual. So Robert Rodriguez always makes good movies. But again, this was an action-packed movie. Lots of gore at the end. Fantastic, and will always go down as a classic. So From Dusk Till Dawn is definitely my number 4 choice of best vampire movies of all time. At number 3, we're going to have to go with Interview with a Vampire, directed by Neil Jordan. This movie is also a great different type of vampire movie that takes place in like the early 1800s. And it has a phenomenal cast in it. You have Tom Cruise, Brad Pitt, Kirsten Dunst, Christian Slater, Antonio Banderas, and it's basically a movie about Brad Pitt's character Louis, who lost his wife, or his the love of his life, and is suicidal and just doesn't care about life anymore. And Lestat, played by Tom Cruise, who's a vampire, notices this and tries to convert him into having something to live for, and turns him into a vampire, which is something that Louis pretty quickly regrets. And he has a hard time trying to keep him up with, killing people and stuff like that, because Louis doesn't want to do that. He still has like a heart, even though he's a vampire.
Those all-seeing eyes were meant to give them detachment. The girl is that.
Then take her, Louis, end that hunger.
No.
So Lestat, played by Tom Cruise, winds up turning a little girl, played by Kirsten Dunst, into a vampire. So it gives him like a father-daughter relationship. So this helps Louis just accept things a little bit better. And then it ends very, very well and got a good ending.
I assume I need no introduction.
So Interview with a Vampire is definitely a great vampire movie. So it goes down in my list as number 3 of all-time greatest vampire movies. Now, at number 2 is definitely going to have to be the 1985 version of Fright Night, directed by Tom Holland. This is a classic, and I saw this when I was younger too. It didn't scare me or anything, but what a great movie. I mean, it's fun. It's a fun movie. I've watched it many times growing up. I'd still watch it today. It's a great movie, but it's about this teenage boy named Charlie Brewster, who has this fascination with horror movies and stuff like that. He's kind of a nerd, and he's got a girlfriend and stuff like that, and he's always watching his horror movies, and they kind of bump heads a little bit, his girlfriend and him. And one day he realizes new neighbors are moving in next door, and he spies on them. And he realizes that his neighbor, because he catches him getting ready to bite a girl's neck, and realizes he's a vampire. So he's flipping out and telling everybody he's got a vampire living next door to him. And his girlfriend, his best friend Evil, and his mother, none of these people believe him. And eventually, he has to go face Jerry Dandridge, who is the head vampire, and it's got a lot of really good makeup effects in it, I thought. And it's fun. There's really good moments, like by Evil.
What? She left a note. Here's dinner's in the oven.
And it's just a really good vampire movie. It's definitely goes down as a classic and always will be. Now they made a remake of this, which is total shit, like every remake is. So please stop doing that, Hollywood. Please take your fingers out of the children and stop making these remakes, man. This is ridiculous. So Fright Night was definitely a classic vampire movie and will always be one of my favorites, and that's why it's number 2 on my favorite vampire movie list. And of course, at number 1 is the 1987 Joel Schumacher's The Lost Boys. This is by far the greatest vampire movie ever made. This is my opinion, but I think if you'd ask a lot of horror fans out there or just movie fanatics out there, they're going to agree with me on this. The Lost Boys was it, man. I went to see that in the theaters in 1987, and it was it. It had everything. This was a fun movie. There's plenty of comedy in it. So it just stays fun the whole movie. Not to mention, you had great actors in it. You had Kiefer Sutherland, Corey Feldman, Corey Haim, Jamie Gertz, who played Star. Might know her from like Less Than Zero, and what a beautiful woman. And it just, this was cool because this was like a gang. So like when you look at how like nowadays you got movies like Twilight and all the stuff, there's a group of people. This was the first one. This is the first one that had a gang. Here's a gang of vampires, and they were all like in their early 20s, and then there was younger kids played by Corey Haim and Corey Feldman, and they had the Frog Brothers, who were really funny.
Hey man, read this.
I told you, I don't like horror comics.
Think of it more as a survival manual. There's a number on the back. And pray you never need to call us.
I'll pray I never need to call you. Sure.
They were teenagers, and the teenagers were fighting, the 20-some-year-old gangs of vampires, and the soundtrack was just off the charts. So even when this movie was released, the soundtrack was like a top seller because it had such great music throughout this movie. And a lot of people will always remember the oily saxophone player playing I Still Believe on the boardwalk, when Michael meets Star, or actually notices Star, and they notice each other. The funny thing of that is the guy playing the saxophone, his name is Tim Capello, okay? He played saxophone for Tina Turner for a long time, and he will always go down as the sweaty, oily saxophone player in The Lost Boys. So again, it just goes to show you, everybody knows who that guy is. They don't know that it's Tim Capello from Tina Turner, but they know who the oily saxophone player is. And that's because of such great music and a great movie. Just so fun. That's a movie that will never get old watching, which is why it is by far my number 1 vampire movie of all times. It's the greatest vampire movie ever made, in my opinion. So I don't know, this is my opinion, but let me know what you think of my list in the comments below. Be sure to like and subscribe, and don't forget to ring that bell to get new notifications of all our new videos.
Who rang that bell?
Hopefully you did. Have a good night.
Wait,